Today we play What's in the Box? This box. I don't think I've ever done this, an unboxing video. First we find the packing slip. Who's it from? But that would be a giveaway. And some packing. It's a guitar case, which isn't a surprise. Fender, MIJ, Jazz, LPB. That sounded like a bass noise. Let's say, not the swankiest of bass cases. This is a 1992 Fender, made in Japan, Lake Placid Blue, that's what the LPD stands for, jazz bass. It's in tune because it's been a strings are in good nick as well. It's beautiful. Bit about the chip, but you know it's over 25 years old, almost 30 years old, so I suppose I better have a play. And here we have, I've moved down into the basement of Fun and Frolics and Amplifiers, so it shouldn't really make too much noise in my office because it is next door to my neighbour's office. So here we are. So this is it, 1992 this was made in Japan. I don't know which factory. Some people find that very important to know which factory in Japan these things come from, or which factory in America, or which, not so much which factory in Korea or Indonesia or all the other millions of places that make guitars these days. But they're made in Japan. Fender at the time moved quite a lot of their standard production stuff to Japan. They found they could get better quality than they could out of their own factory in America. And they sort of rebuilt that side of things, and these days the stuff coming out of America is a lot better than it once was. So, back when I was a youngster learning to play the guitar, the things to be craving weren't Fenders or Gibsons. It was more exotic, more modern things like Chevelles and Kramers and Jacksons, or a whole host of other really more bespoke stuff, which then got more mass produced over in Japan, Korea, etc. Fender were having a bit of a problem back in the 80s where people didn't really want their guitars, they weren't cool in any way. And part of that problem is they never really, despite being the innovators back in the 50s and the 60s, back when this was originally devised, they were groundbreaking. But you get to the 80s and they were massively behind. You know, they weren't really engaged in things like active electronics and whammy bars and pointy shapes and really slim necks and all the other things which those big hair metal guitarists of the 80s wanted, and the bass players as well. Well, they wanted, they wanted 5 strings. They wanted more knobs than you could shake a stick at. Which, if you look at my other basses, is what you get. They have the 5 strings. They've got active electronics. They've got bass and middle and the treble control as well as all this stuff. And this hasn't. This, in comparison, and this is the more, when it originally devised, is the more luxurious, more technically advanced bass from Fender. Their original P bass, which came out in 51. Really basic, just 1 pickup, 1 volume, 1 tone. That was all you got. This is a slightly longer scale length than the P bass. It's got the 2 pickups, so you can get more varied sounds. Fundamentally, it sounds different. Also, the neck's slimmer, making it a lot easier to find your way around. Originally called jazz bass because they wanted to get those jazz players away from their old-fashioned upright basses and onto these newfangled electric things. So they gave it a name which might appeal to them. It sort of worked. But this thing really came into its own when funk came along, funk and soul. So that was when these things really came alive, and the amplification caught up. So all of a sudden people could hear it, which is nice, and is very important on a bass to be able to actually hear yourself. Believe it or not, we like. We're not trying to dominate, but guitarists had it easy, and we didn't. The drummers, they just had to hit a big bit of skin stretched over a wooden tube, and they were loud as hell. So, anyway, back to the case in point, the jazz bass. So we have 2 pickups, a lovely slim neck for the time, and we have a standard Fender colour, late placid bit. We have 2 volume controls. More modern basses tend to have a volume and a pan to go between the 2 pickups. This was more than 1, but this is 2 volume controls, so you can either have all of that pickup or all of that pickup, which is what I've just done. Or if I turn that one back up again, it's both of them. This gives a bit more of a palette to play with. Kind of like palettes, but I tend to, once I'm at a gig especially, I'll have it in one position and I'll stay there. Most of the time on the 2 pickup thing, it's having both of them. It's particularly good for this kind of thing. It's a fabulous thing. Now, it comes as a massive surprise. This is the first instrument I've ever owned, guitar or bass or anything else, which actually had that name, Fender, on the headstock. Never had one before. Come to think of it, it's only a couple of years ago I got my first Gibson. Gibsons are really expensive. Fenders are going to be quite good, especially through their Mexican-made guitars. I mean, slightly more affordable, but they're interesting. I'll give them that. But no, I've never had one before. This was a bit of an impulse buy. I could justify it because I have the money in the bank, because I've not been spending as much because of lockdown. It's a poor reason to justify it. Basically, the colour's nice. I've never had a nice passive jazz bass before. Most of the basses I've ever owned have been active. This means they've got a little amplifier inside them. It means you've got a bit more control over the sound. Mainly it gives you a bit more oomph. What you get in oomph, you can somewhat lack in character, which you get from passive basses, which is kind of there with you, why people still buy them. Also, you have to worry about having a battery. like this. It's quite good. So it's nice to have only 4 strings to worry about. I do like having a low B. Got noise. Which you don't get on this, which is a problem. Is that a problem? Is it a problem? No, it's a problem. It's just a lack of tonal range. But what you gain from it is not having to worry about having that a lower string. It's one less thing to damp, so you can mess about a bit more. Also, there's a bit more space between the strings. Makes that kind of thing a bit easier. Oh, it's brilliant. Anyway, see how I get on with this. You never know, might be selling it in a few months' time, having me. Or I might not, but it is a beautiful colour. It's a beautiful colour. Alright, it's got a bit of a chip out of it. But it's 28 years old. I had a few chips by the time I got to 28. That's putting it mildly.